we continue with our coverage of the train wreck in suspended animation for the moment that is Trump Care. And here to discuss that with us now is our good friend Nancy Altman. Nancy is the president of Social Security Works. She is also chairman of the board of directors of the Pension Rights Center, and she has looked at this tragedy of a bill closely. So first of all, Nancy, as always, great to speak with you.
Thank you so much for having me.
So tell me a little bit about your reactions to this bill. Everybody's talking about who will be taken off health care through the exchanges and so on. But let's talk a little bit about, for example, what it does to Medicaid. Let's start there.
Well, the interesting, not so interesting, I mean, this is a marketing bill. They're calling it health care, but really what it is, there are two things the Republicans want. They want to cut everybody's tax, not everyone's. They want to cut their corporate donors' taxes, and they want to get rid of what they call the entitlements, Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. And this bill moves in that direction. It is enormous tax cuts for the wealthiest among us. And the way they pay for those tax cuts is by destroying Medicaid. This bill not only cuts an enormous amount out of Medicaid, but it fundamentally changes it. So it no longer is a guarantee that whatever medical care you need, you'll get. It caps it. So if you're in a state that can't afford it, too bad for you.
Well, this is an old gambit, as I understand it, on the part of the Republicans. Paul Ryan's been doing this for years with his proposals and his budgets, which is to say, as they did with their Medicare proposals, for example, maybe we used to give you a ride home every night, but now we're going to give you cab fare for a ride home, and if it gets you home, it's fine. If it doesn't, it doesn't. If you have to walk, you have to walk. It's not our problem, but we've capped it. We're only going to give you a couple bucks for cab fare. And then they say, well, we didn't really cut anything. We're still giving you cab fare. Whether or not you can get home is our problem. Do you know what I'm driving at? I mean, I'm trying to...
That is exactly right. That it's a real... first of all, the whole thing that's going on is bait and switch, because they ran against the Affordable Care Act. But the Republicans, Donald Trump said over and over and over again, he would not cut Medicaid. This is a complete cut. They're talking about, I think it's around $800 billion out of Medicaid. So it's hard to say that's not a cut, even though they're trying to worm their way out of it. But the point is that it's not just a cut, bad as that is. It's a fundamental change in exactly the way that you say. It essentially shifts the risk. So before, the reason that you have insurance is that you are insured against risks that would bankrupt you. And what this does is, well, sorry if you get bankrupted, but at least the federal budget will look better than it does now.
Yeah, and to me, that it's an entire abandonment of the idea that we should be controlling healthcare costs, which are out of control in this country, which are much higher than they are in any other developed country, and rising at a faster rate. We don't care anymore. This is just what we'll give you, and if you drown, you drown.
Well, and that's because of the framing of the challenge. What is unmistakably clear is that as you say, our healthcare costs are higher than anywhere else in the world, with much less good outcome in many of the industrialized countries.
I'm losing her.
Measures, including life. And the reason for that is that we have a very wasteful system with all these for-profit insurance companies and fee-for-service. So costs just keep going up, and private costs are a problem as well as public costs. But what the Republicans do is, well, let's not worry about costs. Let's zero in on what the federal balance sheet looks like. Well, Medicare and Medicaid are a symptom of these rising healthcare costs. They're not controlling them. They're not causing them. In fact, they control them better than the private sector. But Republicans do things like not allow Medicare to negotiate over drug prices with the pharmaceutical company. So it's got its hands tied behind its back. We should be moving towards Medicare for all and giving the government the power to negotiate and keep these prices down so they're on a par with what everyone else has. And then it's not a problem to cover everyone. We would have surpluses in the budget if we did those things. But of course, that's not the Republican agenda.
You know, and again, we're talking with Nancy Altman, president of Social Security Works, about Trump Care and the way it treats Medicaid. You know, before you used the phrase Medicare for all, I was thinking, okay, I'm going to take this conversation in a complete right turn because I know Nancy can, track with it and bring up Medicare for all. And it's not such a right turn after all because,
no, it is not.
We're really talking about, in my opinion, tell me if you agree, we're talking about those things that government can do best. That we're not arguing that government does everything in the world best, but one of the things that government does exceptionally well, and every other developed country in the world is a laboratory that proves this, is government does a much better job providing health care to all of its people in a reasonable and progressively funded and cost-effective way. And that's not speculation, that's proof. It's happened everywhere. It's happened here with Medicare and Medicaid operating more efficiently than their private sector cohorts. So to me, what we're dealing with now is this bill reflects the core set of Republican beliefs or desires, however you want to frame it, and that the best way to combat that, in my opinion, and I think you were saying the same thing, but tell me, is by saying, no, let's just get it clear once and for all, government does this better. Let us build a system of Medicare for all. We will have a better economy. Businesses will have more money to invest and grow. All the way down, people will have better coverage at lower individual costs, and the economy will run more smoothly. I don't know. That was a speech on my part. But
I agree. And the danger is, and that everyone should be on guard about this, is that the Republicans have their knives out for Medicare as well as Medicaid. In fact, even in this bill, they raid Medicare of billions of dollars. One of the on the claim that Medicare that's part of one of the tax cuts that they are making is money that's dedicated to Medicare. So they're going to take billions of dollars out of Medicare, and then they're going to go after Medicare directly. You are exactly right. There are some things the government does better than the private sector. The Republicans like to talk about choice. And if you're talking about dishwasher detergent, fine. But when you're talking about healthcare, there already and will be choice in doctors. People don't need choice in who pays their bills. And in fact, when you've got a whole set of insurance companies, all for-profit, and all fragmented that way, it is very inefficient. Insurance is most efficient when you have the largest risk pool possible, and there's no what's called adverse selection. The only entity that can cover everyone in the country under one plan and make sure that everyone pays from the moment they start working is the federal government. And that's why Social Security is so efficient. That's why Medicare is so efficient. It's why Medicaid, even though it's a means-tested program, so very complicated to administer, has lower administrative costs than private health insurance.
And if you assume a profit factor, as everyone did in the framing of the Affordable Care Act, of 15% or so for private health insurance, that's another 15% right there.
Exactly. What you've got with private companies, Prudential or any of these, are very high-paid CEOs. Government civil servants don't have those kinds of high salaries. They don't have to advertise in the same way. And so there is all kinds of efficiency. beyond the fact that profit should not be a motive when we're talking about life and death.
Well, absolutely. And I want to digress once again, Nancy Altman, and bring up something that I think is related to this, if not directly, then indirectly. When I was young, lo, that was many years ago, public service was something to be proud of. When you went to work, you weren't just a bureaucrat and part of the problem. If you went to work for the federal government as managing something or running something or providing a service, it was public service and it was good. You were doing a good thing for your country. Somehow, over the last 40 years, the Democrats have sort of gone along with the conservative rhetoric and the Republican rhetoric that says that government is an occupying force, government is an enemy, government is part of the problem. The fact is there are a lot of really smart, talented, dedicated people, you and I have known some of them, who would be honored to, I think the same would be true of younger generations, would be honored to go into public service doing something like running a Medicare for All system that helps everyone. You don't need stock options in order to get talented people to provide great service. Do you agree with that?
Oh, I agree with it 100%. There are so many people who work for the federal government and the various agencies who are extremely smart, extremely talented, who could make so much money in the private sector, but they turn their back on that and choose to work for all of us. I mean, all the government it's gotten, you're right, it's gotten this somehow this bad name, but all the government is all of us collectively together. It is the Commonwealth. We talk about the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Well, there's Commonwealth, there's common good, and the government is the way through which we express our common good and we spend our commonwealth.
Absolutely. And getting back to this bill, a couple things I wanted to hook in together. One is you mentioned that they're limiting the revenue that comes into Medicare. And even though they say they're not cutting Medicare, you know what's going to happen next. They're going to say we can't afford to keep a Medicare system we have. So that's
stealing from Medicare is a better way to think about it. Not that you're just limiting it, they're raiding it. Okay. They're taking money that's dedicated to Medicare and they're giving it to the wealthiest among us.
Much better said. And yet at the same time, their bills, both of them, including the Senate bill, would make it unaffordable for older, under 65 people, people say 55 to 65, to buy health insurance, to get health insurance, to be insured. So they're taking that entire group of people and really jamming them financially so that they can't get the medical care they need and or they will be in financial desperate straits financially. The ideal solution is to expand Medicare, in my mind, to the 55s and up so that these people are out of the private system altogether. Medicare is more, everybody wins.
Exactly. There's a reason that every senior group you can think of, including the AARP, is strongly against this bill. This bill has what is colloquially called an age tax. It actually goes down to age 50, where you're going to pay a lot more. And the 64-year-old, the one just hanging on for a year to be able to get Medicare, there was a CBO gave an example of someone making $26,000, so doesn't have a lot of discretionary earnings, pays $1,700 under the Affordable Care Act, would pay $14,000, more than half her income, under the House bill, and would pay a little bit less, but still about $7,000 or $8,000 under the Senate bill. This is something that if those people 50 and over who are subject to the age tax were put into Medicare, it would have an interesting result. They would be the least expensive. They would enlarge the pool of Medicare, and they are the least expensive people under Medicare, since Medicare goes up to people who are 110. So it would be the least expensive group. It would reduce those costs, those premiums. It would also reduce private sector premiums because they're the most expensive part of the private sector. the irony here that back in 1965, when we certainly were not as wealthy as we are now, we decided to cover collectively through Medicare the most expensive among us, those who have the highest medical costs, people with disabilities and seniors. It is easier to move that age down. We've already done the hard part and we are more wealthy now. So we should be doing gradually lowering that age, putting in a Medikids program, and let private insurance simply wither on the vine.
And unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there. I always feel we could talk a lot more than we get to. And I will just mention in passing also that according to the AARP as of 2007, 65% of seniors in nursing homes rely predominantly on Medicaid.
Absolutely.
To get there, to stay there. So they are also being shafted in this Republican bill. So really, it would be a win-win for everyone to expand Medicare, unless, of course, you just want to give away money to the rich and you hate government, but that's who the Republicans are. So,
and if I can say just one last thing, because I know we're just about out of time,
yeah.
and that is people have to be vigilant. They have to go to town hall meetings. They have to write letters. They have to protest in the streets, because Republicans are in control of the White House, the Senate, and the House. And we could be seeing the end of Medicaid, and then Medicare, and then Social Security will be right behind that.
Well said. And we're going to leave it there. Nancy Altman, president of Social Security Works. That's socialsecurityworks.org. Thanks for all the great work you do, and thanks for coming on the program.
Thank you so much. This is so important.